In Sichot Haran 101, Rabbi Nachman of Brislov says, no sophistication is needed in serving Hashem. Only simplicity and sincere emunah, faith. Simplicity is higher than all else, for God is certainly higher than everything else, and God is ultimately simple. Now, you wouldn't think that the creator of the universe is simple. It's the idea that he is complex in the ideas that we cannot comprehend, but he's very simple, very pure. Today, I would like to speak to you for a few minutes about the metaphor of the desert. The metaphor of the desert. In Numbers, the first chapter, first verse, it says, on the day of the second month, in the second year, following the exodus from the land of Egypt, Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying, and then we know that on and on he talks about doing a, what do you call it, a census, yeah, a census. Why does the Torah mention these two places when it appears to be superfluous to even mention either one? It is obvious they're not in the land. It's obvious that they're in the desert. Why mention this? Ever since the tabernacle was built, the Lord spoke to Moshe from the tent of meeting, and that the people were in the wilderness of Sinai, no questions about it. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch commented in this verse, and he says, the census was taken in the wilderness. From this, we learn that the census was not for economical or political purposes, for these have no bearing in the wilderness. Rather, the addition of the words Sinai in the tent of meeting indicates that this census was dedicated to the Torah. The purpose of the census was for the Torah. The Torah was given at Mount Sinai, with the tent of meeting being the place for accepting responsibility to follow its commandments. Thus we see that these two expressions indicates not only where the Lord spoke to Moshe, but also the object of the census. That is, quote unquote, the dedicated to the Torah. The combination of the wilderness, representing the public sphere, and the region that does not belong to anyone in particular on one hand, and the tent of meeting, the Holy of Holies. Restricted to the Lord's communing with Moshe for him to receive the teaching of the commandments. In the other hand, it is indicative of the unique combination. So what we learn is the idea of the wilderness being mentioned and the tent of meeting was that no one owned that space. It was an open space, free of obligation to anyone else except for whom? Hashem. A similar idea is expressed in the Midrash, Numbers Rabbah, in the Vienna edition, chapter 1 says this, the Lord spoke to Moshe in the wilderness at Sinai, rather, whoever does not make himself like a wilderness, hefker, open to all, cannot attain wisdom and Torah. Therefore it says, in the wilderness of Sinai. So really, the idea is making yourself a wilderness. Now I'm going to get to the point in just a moment in which we'll realize that every one of us in this room on our personal journey had to become a wilderness, segregated from all the things that you learned and thought in the past, separated from all the things that kept you from fully receiving Torah to receive the Torah of Moshe in your life. The wilderness represents the absence of materialism, natural purity, and humility. It gives human beings the ability to listen to their inner voice, to their true feelings, to honestly be at their best, to have true integrity before the Creator. It also gives them the ability to be open and receptive to the filters of the soul and of the person contemplating the infinite expanses of the wilderness. I used to say to people, because I love the outdoors, and it feels that I'm closer to Hashem when I'm outdoors. Have you guys had the same feeling? You go out to West Texas, and I feel like I'm in the Holy Land, right? It's just beautiful. There's rivers flowing through it, and the waters are amazing. To get into the waters, to feel the cold waters of the Rio Frio, it's like I feel so close to Hashem. Well, why do we feel that? It's because we're sort of disconnected from the cell phones and the technology that interrupts us. These characteristics from the formation for perfect acceptance of Torah is not acquired through our pride and through our clutter. You and I both know that our previous world experience was nothing more than a clutter to our attachment to Hashem. What we all ended up having to do in our previous life and our journey toward knowing Hashem was to begin to tear away what is known as the klippah. Do we know what the klippah is? What is the klippah? Well, if you were to give an example of klippah, what would it be? Like husk on a corn, or a rind on a watermelon, or we all know that the klippah is meant to protect that which is in the center, but it also keeps you from obtaining the fruit. And for some reason, we develop this klippah of our emotional world that we live in, the materialistic world, and it can just clutter up the very fruit that Hashem wants us to have. The census of the Israelite in the wilderness and the encampment of the tribes under their standard, and with the tribal chieftains and the placement of the tabernacle in the midst of the encampment, and on other details given in this week's reading, attests to the model of order that caused Balaam to make this quote. Numbers 24:5. How fair are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwelling, O Israel. The tension between the desert as a place of abandonment and meticulous order demanded of the people is that forged the basic characteristic of the Israelites as a people. Years of wandering in the wilderness provided the formation of the period of history of the Jewish people. And despite all the people's shortcomings in coping with the Lord's commandments during this period, their wandering in the desert is remembered favorably in this expression by the prophet Jeremiah. He says, "Thus saith the Lord, I account to your favor the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness, in the land that was not sown." When I first began to contemplate these words by Yair Barchai, I was reminded of my own personal walk with Hashem and how there was a time of loneliness, because you realized that your paradigm, your Egypt that you were in, you had to enter into a desert. And often in advice to people that call me and say, I feel alone in this journey, I have no Jewish community, I don't know where to start, what do? I tell them, welcome home. Welcome to the desert, right? This is where you're supposed to be. Okay, Hashem designed it in such a way that if you're going to enjoin yourself to the Jewish people, whether it's conversion or as a B'nai Noach, is going to require you to live in the desert for a while, period. And guess who does not get the choice of how long you live there? You. I'm sure every Israelite would have loved to take the shortcut across the top of the Sinai Peninsula into Israel, taking about a couple of days. They would have loved to have done that. It didn't happen, did it? Hashem determined every step of the walk for them because something had to be processed. And that's why we're so happy to tell people who are on their own personal journey when they feel discouraged, like I don't feel like I'm there yet, I wish I could do this, I wish I could do that. You tell them, stop, quit trying to have such chutzpah. God knows what He's doing. You are actually serving God. And I love what Adam was talking about, is the fact that all of this is about one thing, and it's about our service to Hashem. And we have to remember that our very journey is our service to Hashem. See, a lot of people think, well, one day when I get to this place, I will now be officially serving Hashem. That's not the case. As a matter of fact, I believe that that's your Yetzer Hara that's wanting to convince you you're not really serving Hashem, and that only one day, if you get to this status, will you be serving Hashem. But in reality, if you babysit children and you have a school for children, you're serving Hashem. When you go to work every day and you wake up and you know that you're living a righteous, moral life and you're abiding by the laws of God, you're serving Hashem. When we come this evening to study Torah together, and it's not because you're in this building, but because we're hearing the words of the great sages of Judaism and we're applying it to our personal life, we are serving Hashem. It's incredible. It takes it off to, its service is not about coming to do what do you call it, a religious event. This is here to be who we are supposed to be. We are human beings attempting, or we're spiritual beings attempting to have a human experience. Does it make sense? Since the theme of this prophecy, talking about, and there shall be a response in that day from the youth, and they shall come up from the land of Egypt, this idea that in Hosea talks about how God betroths himself to his people, and that he would never leave them. He would never forsake them. Even though they would leave him and they would forsake him, that he would not do that. Since this theme of prophecy concerns the competition, the wilderness serves as a solution. As a solution, since there is no competition there. By sustaining Israel in the wilderness, the bond between Israel and the Lord will remain forever. The intimacy experienced in the wilderness with no competition or factors that are likely to break the union between the two spouses, that is Hashem and his people, will rehabilitate the relationship. The wilderness, as said in Jeremiah 2:2, is also where the couple began the relationship. And therefore it will remind them of the love of yore when it is powerful and imbued with mutual trust, and will thus bring them to renew their vows, and will come and renew unification. And it says, I will espouse you forever. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice, and with godliness and mercy. I will espouse you with faithfulness. Then you shall be devoted to the Lord. Just as Hashem made his commitment and covenant to his people, he also makes the commitment and covenant to every human being that lives on this earth that will enter into their own desert and seek him. Enter into a place in which you divest yourself of materialistic things, of all the emotional entrapments that keep you from embracing all the loving kindness of Hashem, and then begin to walk with him day by day. When someone comes to you and says, oh, how do I serve Hashem? You tell them, breathe. Breathe. Just get up every day and breathe and be grateful and have gratitude. That's all you have to do to serve Hashem. You say, well, I don't know Torah that well. That's fine. Breathe and listen to Torah. And be righteous and full of goodness. Treat people with kindness. Be a person of justice. You are serving Hashem. And it is he who determines when you reach the final level of maturity. What does Israel, the land of Israel, mean for the Jewish people? It means maturity. And in essence, every human being out there has a journey, a spiritual journey, which ultimately results in your spiritual maturity. That spiritual maturity, God determines when you finally arrive there, but you have to continue to walk with him on a daily basis. May Hashem guide you and direct you in your path. May you walk with him with strength and go from strength to strength as you accomplish spiritual maturity and understanding that everyone is in the desert. It's part of our journey. Amen. Everybody say shalom. Okay, now we